Too often I've seen people talk about the radical left wanting to abolish private property.
They just told me up there they don't care about private property, they will destroy it.
Abolition of private property, you know, that thing that is essential to the fundamental bulwark of freedom.
Alright, now Sargon of Akkad is absolutely right there. Private property is required for individual human beings to live free. And some of you might be wondering why I am responding to a video that is 2 years old. And the reason for that is because recently I've heard this concept, personal property, that is thrown around by Marxist scum. I heard Hassan Proletariat Biker using it recently. And I think personal property is what Ayn Rand would call an anti-concept. And an anti-concept is an unnecessary and rationally unusable term that is designed to obliterate and replace legitimate concepts. And as you'll see, the anti-concept personal property is meant to obliterate private property.
The Antifa just has an absolute respect for people's rights and their private property.
And this is true, but it's not being used in the same way of what is traditionally viewed, which leads to, of course, some understandable confusion. So here's how a socialist such as myself defines it. Bear in mind this all works around the parameters of the capitalist system that we live in. Private property is property which is used to accumulate profit.
Now, this is true to a certain extent. Private property is required. Private property is what you use to benefit your own life. And using it to accumulate profit, using private property for monetary gain, is a way in which you can benefit your own life. But you don't need to use private property for monetary gain in order to benefit your own life. A classic example is an oven, a conventional oven. You can use a conventional oven to prepare meals for your own sustenance, to feed yourself, to feed your family. You can bake a casserole. You could use the stovetop to make some macaroni and cheese or cook up some sausages, whatever you want to use your oven for. But you could also use your oven to bake brownies to sell at a bake sale, in which you are using your oven for monetary gain. Or maybe a pair of scissors. You could use a pair of scissors for personal use. You need to cut some packaging opening to get an item out of a box. Or you could use scissors in a professional setting. You could use it to cut hair for monetary gain. So you can have it both ways. But as we all know, Marxists get really butthurt when you exploit things for monetary gain.
This can include such examples: a road, a limousine, a railroad, a factory, a restaurant, a production studio, a forest, a lake, oh hell, a mountain.
Yes, you can use a mountain for monetary gain. Isn't it amazing? A mountain which is it's land and property that is largely uninhabitable by human beings, and it's hard to navigate. Yet we can turn it into monetary gain by building ski resorts or nature trails for a profit motive. Isn't that wonderful, people? I kind of said that sarcastically, but I meant it legitimately. I think, yes, build some ski resorts on mountains. Why not?
So now we must ask, what is personal property? Personal property is, to put it simply, the things you own.
So it's private property. You see this? They're trying to replace the concept private property with personal property.
Including your house.
Your house. That's not private property, it's personal property.
Your car. Your camera. Your TV. Your computer.
Yes, a computer, it's just meant to be, personally owned. It's not, you can't use it for monetary gain, though. Heaven forbid that.
Bed, your oven, and yes, your toothbrush. But it's worth bearing in mind there is no specific list, so to speak. All
no specific list, huh?
These things can technically be used for private profit-making devices, but if you own them individually or as a group for the purposes of use, then no person has a problem with this.
See? As long as you're using it for personal use, personal consumption, then no one has a problem with it. Additionally, there's no specific list. Isn't that convenient? That there's no specific list? So, the whole point of this anti-concept personal property is to give Marxist pieces of crap like this person the authority to tell you and everyone else what you're allowed to own and not allowed to own. So he listed a house as an example of personal property. So imagine a case where you own a house and you have a garage. It's personal property. You're not using it for monetary gain at the moment. You're just using it as a consumable item, a domicile to reside in. Now imagine you start using your house, your personal property, to rent out a room for monetary gain. Well, that's where you cross the line, buddy, because you're exploiting the person. You're exploiting your poor tenant by renting him out a room. Or say you have a garage. Say you have a garage that's full of tools on your personal property, and all of those tools, the monkey wrenches and the socket wrenches and everything else, those are all personal property. And you decide that you want to make some extra cash because, as we all know, under communism, times are tough for everyone. So you decide that you're really into mechanics. You're really into fixing up cars. And you notice that the state-owned mechanics, they're all inefficient, and it takes 2 to 3 months to get your car in there because, as we all know, when government gets in the business of anything other than retaliatory use of force, it does a shitty job. So you decide you want to make some extra cash on the weekends, so you open up a mechanic shop in your garage, in your personal property, working on cars with your personal property. And business is booming because there's a lot of demand for mechanics. Because after all, it takes months to get into the state-owned mechanics, so people are coming to you, you're fixing up their cars, you're making money, and then suddenly you're like, man, I'm backed up. I don't have nearly enough time to fix all of these cars. So then you decide to hire some helping hands, and you're going to train them by passing on your wisdom of mechanics, your knowledge of how to fix cars to these new workers, and you're going to pay them a little bit to help fix up these cars with your personal property. Well, that's where you're going too far, buddy. Now that personal property, your garage, your tools, is that when it becomes, is that when they seize the means of production? Is that when it's okay? When you start exploiting other people's labor and using your personal property for monetary gain? Oh no, you guys, not monetary gain. Can't have that going on.
The problem arises when the social condition of said property starts depriving people of it for use in the market economy.
Yes. That's an aspect of private property. You're allowed to tell people. You're allowed to decide who gets to use it and not use it. I own a house. I'm allowed to tell people to leave. I'm allowed to keep people out. That's the whole point of having a private house, is that I live there and I need shelter to keep me safe from potential intruders and burglars and squatters. It's my house. I get to kick people out. If I prepare a pizza pie, I get to decide who gets to eat a slice. If I own a Nintendo Switch, I get to decide who gets to play it and who does not get to play it.
Economy, otherwise known as antagonism.
Oh no, not class antagonism.
But don't they deserve such property, seeing as, they earned it? No! The relations of private property...
Nope, no one deserves private property. You only get the property that the state decides you're allowed to get.
Entrenched in violence and enclosure. The commons form...
Yeah, because communism and Marxism are not entrenched in violence.
Formerly used for the way of free access were gradually turned away through legal acts or via violent revolution by merchants.
Oh, how convenient. I guess because most, if not all plots of land have a history of people fighting over it, fighting and warring over it. I guess no one's allowed to have private property. What a convenient excuse.
Experiment, go talk to a capitalist and ask him how he came to garner such property.
I presume he used money. Even in a mixed economy, you need either money or you need to go to the government for eminent domain, which is complete bullshit. But in most cases, you need money to accumulate land. How about this? Here's an experiment. Go on Redfin, go on Realtor.com, and find some property that you want, and try to take it with guns and see how far you get.
Then ask him how his forebearers came to garner it. And when they eventually come to the end, they should tell you that it was probably garnered by violence. In which case, challenge him to a duel. Now this can raise some problems.
So again, every capitalist, they're guilty of the sins of people that lived hundreds and thousands of years ago.
Problematic situations. So for example, what if somebody owned 1,000 acres of land and used it entirely for the purposes of leisure?
Well, how did they accumulate that land? Again, did they buy it? Was it accumulated through mutual trade and transaction? Those 1,000 acres. What if they spent $1 million, $1,000 per acre? Well, the people that sold that land, they presumably made better off. If they wanted the money more than the land that they sold, then it sounds like a win-win transaction to me.
Making any money off of it. Well, then you might need to ask how on...
And this is see, now he's complaining that the person in this hypothetical scenario is not making any money off of it. When you just said that that's a problem with private properties, people use it to make money. Which is it? Which way do you want it?
How on earth is somebody supporting 1,000 acres of land without putting it to any use? And probably what comes of this...
So, you notice this logic here? You're only allowed to have land. You're only allowed to have property if you're putting it to good use by some arbitrary standard.
Of this is that they are exploiting profit in other ways to supplement this. In which case you need to ask them whether or not they can justify 1,000 acres of land simply for their own personal leisure.
See, you're only allowed to own property if you can justify it to the philosopher kings like this guy. And I think Hitler and the Nazis, I think they had this view on private property, that you're only allowed to own property so long as you're using it to benefit the state and benefit society in some arbitrary manner. Otherwise, you're not using it and you don't need it.
Or can it be put to a better measure? Now, obviously, no individual...
See, if you're not using it to the standards of the philosopher kings, then they should be able to just come in and take it from you so that they can put it to good use.
Measure. Now, obviously, no individual can constantly own a railway for personal use, which is why there's a third type of property, collective property, whereby it is owned by a group or and for society at large.
Yeah, isn't that great? Isn't it great when everyone owns something? Because when everyone owns something, then does anyone truly own it?
The end goal, this is, I believe, the private...
Imagine if your house was owned by society as a whole. Then you don't get to kick anyone out. Anyone and everyone can just waltz on into your house and do whatever they want.
These should be transferred over to the workers' use so that can be used collectively for a common good, specifically the means of production or base.
So yeah, if you ever take a risk and start a business and open a factory and invest your own money and figure out how to run the factory efficiently. I think McDonald's had this problem, the McDonald's brothers. It took them weeks, if not months, how to figure out how to efficiently assemble hamburgers at a low cost. It took a lot of trial and error. But once you figure that out and once you hire some helping hands, those helping hands get to just take over your business and property because I guess they deserve it more than you do. Because they work for you.
Or basically, how everything comes to be created in the first place for process in the economy. And in many leftist minds, to later be used in conjunction with a revolution of sorts to transfer over into communism. There are, of course, many nuances that come with this question, such as occupancy and use, but this video isn't going to go into the detail of such things, merely describing the basic principles of private versus personal.
Which there really is no difference. The distinction with personal property is that the philosopher kings of the proletariat get to decide what you get to own and not own. Doesn't that sound wonderful, folks?